It's Sunday, 21st of September 25, and today our Prime Minister Keir of the UK recognised Palestine after we basically created it 106 years ago. So we created it, it was wiped off the map, and now we've been saying for decades a two-state solution, and then we'll recognise Palestine afterwards. I'm not sure how soon after Israel said, we're calling this Israel, it's a new land. I'm not sure how long after UK recognised it, but America recognised it after about 8 minutes, I think it was, around about in 1948. And so, really, because before then it was part of the Ottoman Empire, there wasn't a state really. We created the borders basically for Palestine. I think at first it included Jordan, and then that was split off, I think, to please the Jordanian king there. So really, I think we were building it. Us and France basically split that whole place up, and we were meant to rule it as part of our empire. I mean, the two places that can really have a grievance against us are Palestine and Northern Ireland. I mean, what's happening to Palestine is terrible. Really, really terrible. I mean, what's been happening to them ever since this started, 120 years ago, has been terrible. But just the last 2 years have been. It can't get any worse. When I think of Schindler's List and stuff, and then all this stuff, it's not hard to find stuff on X, and I'm glad that's been shown because news isn't entertainment. When you watch it on legacy mainstream media, it'll be entertainment. You don't see the gruesomeness, the bodies and stuff. But on X, you're seeing the bodies, and it's terrible. And yeah, I'm a bit surprised that Keir done this because it's taken this long for a start, and he's always been going on about Israel's point of view. I think his wife and even his children are going to a certain type of religious school, So I don't know if he's worried about his legacy now, because it's so bad, the stuff that's coming out, and I think it's going to be worse over the years as people understand what's happened. I don't know how you can't take it any other way. I mean, you still don't feel I can say on YouTube the two things that I think are happening. One's to do with cleansing, and the other one's to do with what the UN just announced this week. But I still don't know if you can say that on YouTube. To be honest, it's been obvious for 2 years. But even before that, the decades before, the whole time, I think Brits with a sense of fairness should have always been on Palestine's side. But the only bit of comfort I can think of Palestinians is it seems that they don't want to live in the region if they leave the area. They don't want to live in the region. It looks like most of them want to live in the West. I don't know if that's for sure, but it looks that way. And when they get here, say for a hospital or whatever, they'll all be claiming asylum, citizenship, applying for citizenship, etc. But to me, that says to judge them on that. Why would you want citizenship of Britain and America when we're two of the countries that have caused it and causing it now? So from their point of view, I think they shouldn't be wanting to come to these countries, it looks. But if it's any comfort to them, what happened to them is now happening to us in Britain, and Palestinians will be a part of that new majority. So basically, Britain's going to change beyond recognition as well as what happened there. Over there, you can call them indigenous people and that. I don't know about it. Well, can you? I don't know. But in America, you can call the Indians there, American Indians, indigenous. The Greens will go on about that all the time, and then the Greens will go on about the Aborigines of Australia. The same sort of thing's going to happen here, and Palestinians will be part of that new majority. So that's the only comfort I think for them. But UK was definitely to blame for it, because at the time we were the big empire, and then of course America took over really. So, um, so I'll just take a look at what Google Gemini is saying. Also, I should say that Australia and Canada have also announced today, and this they've been saying that we'd do this a month or 2 months ago. I mean, why wait? I really don't know why they wait. And Israel didn't let them down in the sense that they weren't going to do anything different. In fact, it made Israel increase what they were doing. So to me, that's more shame for Keir Starmer and the other leaders, Australia, Canada, etc. They've all helped the US and Israel to do what they're doing. I mean, there was a thing the other week, I don't know if this is correct, but somebody next said that when Israel bombed Qatar about 2 weeks ago, British military aircraft in Qatar took off, helped refuel the planes, I think. I don't know whether it was after they bombed, and then landed in Qatar again on their Qatari base. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. Yeah, but Australia and Canada have also, because they're part of the shameful Westerns on this issue. I mean, this issue has been a great embarrassment, I think, for the West. It's certainly been against my values. And what we've seen of in polls recently, it looked to me as if most Brits are sympathetic to the Palestinians. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it doesn't feel that way, when Labour are talking about it, or the Tories, or it's one of these things that doesn't feel that what's happening. It's a bit like the other issue. I think the other big issue is immigration. These two things, and it is ironic because Israel's the thing on the left, and then they don't want people to be able to talk about immigration openly. They want people cancelled, locked up, etc. on that subject. And then on this subject, it's them that's been locked up and cancelled. It is ironic. Yeah. So, yeah, Australia and Canada also done it. France are going to do it tomorrow, so they said. I don't know why they went. It's a UN meeting at the moment. Netanyahu said he'll show you his reaction to it once he gets back home. And I think he's going to announce they're going to take over big parts of the West Bank. Or they might even just move lots of Palestinians out of the West Bank into Jordan or something. I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me. Maybe Hebron, he's going to do something big. Yeah. So to me, it's always been embarrassing and anti-British, really, in terms of values. Like I say, I think Palestine and Northern Ireland, they're the two places get a right to think. If it's any comfort, like I say, it's Britain that's been colonised now. A lot of countries we didn't colonise. We colonised America, Australia, New Zealand, and Northern Ireland. We let Palestine be colonised. But now we're being colonised by most of the countries that we didn't colonise. We just ruled over, and it's possibly the best years of those countries' existence. I don't know, but yeah, like a lot of one of the biggest recent arrivals in nationality has been from Zimbabwe, which used to be Rhodesia. So maybe someday they'll ask for reparations once they've been citizens for a long enough time or whatever. Anyway, I'll just do a bit of history on this. I mean, it looks to me as if, Palestine was wiped off the map and now they're being driven into the sea, basically. That's what it looks like to me, The ones that are still alive, that is. To me, I think I associate it with Labour, the Tories. Well, they've been the two governments in power. It's their legacy, really. Yeah, just it's been inhabited since prehistoric times. In fact, I think one of the towns here is meant to be thought of as possibly the oldest town in the world. It's the one in the Palestinian area, Jericho, maybe. Don't know. I'm just looking at this. The British Mandate, end of World War One. The region was placed under British administration by the League of Nations in 1922. We took off the Ottoman Empire. Then there was a Balfour Declaration in 1917, in which the British expressed support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for other people that weren't there at the time, really. Although they were to a small degree, but I think it was around about the 1880s it became a trend. Yeah. Numbers swelled in the 1930s. And then there was a partition plan in 1947. The British turned it over to the United Nations. Yeah, it's not really telling me anything. I'm just looking at why Balfour did his declaration in 1917. Here's it saying: it's a complex statement, born from a mix of strategic, political and ideological motivations. While it expressed support for a national home in Palestine, its underlying reasons were multifaceted and have been debated by historians since. They think the main reasons were strategic and imperial interests, so it wasn't really, it was selfish in a way. Support for this could influence financiers and political leaders in the US to push their government to remain in the war and support the Allied cause. Yeah, because we were at war at that time. In America, I'm not sure if they were helping. Well, they were helping us, but I'm not sure they were involved. Possibly they were. I mean, Republicans probably didn't want involved in World War One or World War Two. They hoped it would encourage communities in Russia to keep their country fighting after the 1917 revolution. Protecting the Suez Canal. Yeah, because it's quite near. Yeah. They thought they might have a loyal ally in the area. And a trade route to India and other British colonies. Ideological and personal beliefs. A number of influential British politicians, including Prime Minister David Lloyd George and Arthur Balfour, he's a Scot by the way, had a strong Christian upbringing and held evangelical beliefs. They saw the return of the people to the Holy Land as a fulfillment. Support for the Zionist movement. The declaration was also a result of intense lobbying by prominent leaders, particularly Chaim Weizmann. Weizmann had cultivated strong connections with the British elite and had assisted the British war effort as a chemist. He effectively argued the case, and his efforts influenced the government's decision. Geopolitical considerations during the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, gaining an upper hand in the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire, an enemy of the Allies, was collapsing. Britain and France were vying for control over its territories. This was a way for Britain to secure its claim to Palestine, giving it a justification to administer the area after the war. This was done in conjunction with, but also in conflict with, other secret wartime agreements like the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which had already divided the region into spheres of influence. In summary, the Balfour Declaration was not a purely humanitarian gesture. While it reflected some genuine sympathy for the cause, it was also a calculated move to advance British imperial interests during a crucial period of the First World War. It is important to note that the declaration created conflicting obligations, as it was made alongside other promises of independence in the same region, laying the groundwork for future tensions and conflict. So, really, Britain caused it, full stop, really. Yeah, around about the 1900s, the first decade, Arthur Balfour was Prime Minister, and that's when this thing happened. So I was just looking, because I've heard about this before, to show you. Yeah, his views on this was complex and can be seen as contradictory. While he was deeply sympathetic to the persecution, his response was rooted in his own imperialist and arguably those beliefs. The Aliens Act of 1905. The most telling example of his views is his role in the Aliens Act of 1905. As Prime Minister, Balfour spearheaded this legislation, which was the first law in the UK to impose immigration controls. So there you go. The main purpose of the Act was to restrict the influx of Eastern European fleeing from Russia. Balfour and his supporters argued that these were a source of social and economic problems, including overcrowding and unemployment. This position was criticised by his opponents, who saw it as a violation of the British tradition of offering that to the persecuted. In his speeches, Balfour described them as, well, there you go, what he said, that Britain needed to be saved from. So, solving the question, this seemingly contradictory stance, with a desire to keep some out of Britain, is a key to understanding Balfour's support for that. For Balfour, it presented a solution to a problem he saw in Europe. In his view, were a people too long regarded as alien and even hostile, that Europe was unable to expel or absorb. Therefore, the establishment of a national home over there was a way to relieve pressure on Britain. It would provide a destination, thus justifying his policy of restricting their entry into the UK. Address a perceived European problem. It would solve that by giving their own homeland, which he believed was the only place they could truly belong. While he expressed genuine Christian beliefs about the return of the people to the Holy Land, his political actions reveal that his support for a national home was also a pragmatic solution to a domestic and imperial issue. This dual motivation is what makes his legacy so complex and controversial. But anyway, the Prime Minister's residence in Israel is Balfour Street. So I don't know if they forgot about this or what, they don't mind. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out, it's I never thought I would see this day, even though it's just symbolic, really. It doesn't mean, and even if it would have been symbolic, even if they'd done it before the last 2 years, but to do it now, it's almost too late. I mean, I think I've cleared out Gaza City almost. I think they're almost at the way they want it to end, really. It's always been a mystery to me how in Britain we can't talk about this, really using our common sense in a way. And then on the other hand, we can't talk about how Britain's changing, so we get this on the left, can't talk about this, the right can't talk about that. I can't talk about either of them, and it's just weird, the country we live in. It is evolving now, because I see Tommy get his YouTube channel back. I think it was after, only in the last couple of weeks, maybe after that big demonstration, but it's showing you even YouTube's changed now, the spectrum. We were going really down a really dark path, I think, a dark woke path where we were hardly been able to talk about anything apart from what the left and far left want to talk about, apart from this issue. But now that seems to, we're getting to free speech to an extent, although people are still getting arrested and stuff. Anyway, I just thought I would read that to you, because I think it's one of the, I think where Britain has been really to blame in it. With Keir, his wife, they've sent his children to a certain school, even though Keir's not, I don't know if he's converted or what, I don't know, but so I was wondering maybe he sees it as a sort of, he's worried about his legacy, the way it looks, because he's been pretty supportive over the last 2 years to Israel, so yeah, okay, that's all. Bye bye.